A pretty heavy situation today. It's unfolding right now in The Hague. There's been a massive explosion that ripped right through an apartment building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really bad. 5 apartments are just gone, completely destroyed. And debris is everywhere, all over the street. They're even saying shop windows like a block over got blown out. It's crazy.
Yeah, I saw some pictures online. Looks like a war zone.
And the thing is, our sources are giving us like live updates all day, so it feels like we're watching it all happen minute by minute. The rescue efforts, everything. It's just chaos.
Yeah.
And no one seems to know what happened yet.
Yeah, it's really scary. And the fact that they've called in Urban Search and Rescue, USR, the teams that were in Turkey after the earthquakes, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is.
Wow, yeah. I didn't realize they had brought in USR.
Yeah.
That definitely gives you a sense of the scale of this disaster. So what can you tell us about these USR teams? What makes them so specialized?
Well, they're trained for exactly this kind of situation. Building collapses. I mean, it's not just firefighting, it's a whole other level of expertise.
Right.
They have to navigate unstable structures, constantly assess risks, and use very precise techniques to try to locate and extract survivors.
Yeah, it makes sense. It sounds incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
So let's walk through what we know so far about what happened. It sounds like the first reports came in around 6:20 this morning.
Yeah, that's right. And at first, there's a lot of confusion. I saw some sources mention a small explosion first, and then a much larger one right after. But investigators are still trying to figure out exactly what happened.
Wow, so there could have been 2 explosions.
That's what it sounds like. But yeah, they're still piecing it together.
Okay, wow. And it sounds like they knew right away that this was a major emergency because they issued a GRIP 2 response.
Exactly. GRIP 2 means they're dealing with a high-risk incident. Very complex. They need a coordinated response from all sorts of agencies. Police, fire, medical, you name it.
So everyone's scrambling to figure out what to do.
Basically, yeah.
And all this is happening. And then they realize there are people trapped under the rubble.
Oh, man.
It's just a race against time at that point.
It is.
They put hospitals on standby, and the rescue efforts begin. What do those initial efforts look like in a situation like this?
Well, you have to picture the scene. It's completely unstable, dust everywhere. And you're looking for any sign of life, any little thing.
I can't even imagine.
They use dogs, especially trained dogs,
Yeah.
to try to detect any hints of survivors. And then it's just painstakingly removing debris very carefully.
It sounds terrifying. And I know I read something about them using a grabber truck. What is that exactly?
Oh, yeah. It's basically a giant hydraulic arm with this claw-like attachment.
get it.
And they use it for really delicate demolition work. Like if they need to move a huge chunk of concrete, maybe the size of a car or something, they can do it without causing further collapse.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you need incredible precision in that situation.
Absolutely. And the sources mentioned that the search efforts were actually stopped for a while because the building was too dangerous.
Yeah, I read that too.
Could you imagine the agony for the families just waiting for news?
It must be unbearable.
Really?
And the sources paint a pretty vivid picture of the emotional toll. There are quotes from eyewitnesses who describe being jolted awake, the feeling like a rocket hit the building. One person even compared it to the explosion in Rotterdam earlier this year, which, if you remember, was linked to a suspected drug lab.
That's right. I had forgotten about that.
Uh,
But it sounds like in this case, the cause of the explosion is still a mystery.
yeah, they haven't figured it out yet.
Huh. So are they looking into anything specific?
Well, there's a lot of speculation about a car. It was seen speeding away from the scene right after the explosions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and some witnesses described it going incredibly fast.
So that's definitely suspicious.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So while they're working on figuring out what happened, it sounds like the community is already starting to come together, which is amazing to see.
Oh, absolutely. It's heartwarming. Like ADO Den Haag, the local football club, they were playing their game tonight with morning bands. And they held a minute of silence before kickoff.
Oh, wow. That's really nice.
Yeah. And then there's this group, Lichtpuntjes om Mariohoef.
Lichtpuntjes van Mariehoeve. I'm not familiar with them.
They're a local volunteer group, always seem to be the first ones to step up when something like this happens.
Okay.
And in this case, they've organized a donation drive to help the people who lost everything.
Wow, that's incredible. Are they just collecting money or are there other ways to help?
They're doing a bit of everything. Warm clothes, food, toiletries, even school supplies for the kids who are displaced. Thinking about both the immediate needs and the long-term recovery.
That's really thoughtful. And it sounds like it's not just everyday people stepping up either. The sources said that Mayor Van Zanen visited the scene. and met with some of the residents who lost their homes.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he's issued a state of emergency to help expedite the rescue efforts.
It's good to see the city taking it seriously.
Yep.
And that kind of visible leadership is crucial. It shows the community that their leaders are present, engaged, committed to doing everything they can to support them.
It sounds like amidst all this devastation and uncertainty, there are glimmers of hope and resilience starting to emerge.
It's inspiring to see people come together like this.
It really is. But as the day went on, the news started to take a more somber turn.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they officially shifted the operation from rescue to recovery in the afternoon.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
And sadly, they did find the body of the first victim.
That's heartbreaking.
That's so sad. And as more time passes, I imagine the chances of finding anyone else alive are slim. It just makes you think about how fragile life really is, how a normal day can just turn into a nightmare.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective.
It does.
Makes you realize we take so much for granted.
Absolutely.
And this incident, with the cause still unknown, it really makes you think about all the risks we overlook every day.
Right.
Like, we assume everything's going to be fine, but it could all change in an instant.
It's scary to think about.
It is.
And it could be anything, right? A gas leak, an act of violence, a freak accident.
Exactly. And each possibility comes with a whole different set of implications.
That's true. It's almost like the uncertainty makes it even scarier.
I think so.
But in the meantime, the investigators are doing their best to figure out what happened.
Yeah, they're working around the clock.
They're putting out calls for anyone with information to come forward, especially about that speeding car we talked about.
Right. They're looking for any footage at all. Doorbell cameras, dash cams, security cameras, anything.
Oh, yeah.
It could be the smallest detail that helps them put the pieces together.
And while that's happening, the community support has been amazing. We were talking about the Lichtpuntjes van Rehoeve donation drive earlier. What really struck me is that they're not just giving money, they're really thinking about the immediate needs of these families.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Trying to create some sense of normalcy amidst the chaos.
Exactly. Put yourself in their shoes for a second. You lose everything, your home, your belongings, maybe even loved ones. You'd be in shock, completely overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely.
And these volunteers are thinking about those basic things. Warm clothes, toiletries, food, the stuff we often take for granted.
Right.
It's about providing comfort and dignity.
When people are at their most vulnerable.
Exactly.
And it sounds like they're not the only ones. The sources mentioned a bunch of other initiatives, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like local businesses offering free meals, community centers opening up for temporary shelter.
Wow.
Even therapists offering counseling services for people who are struggling.
That's amazing.
It's really heartwarming to see the community come together like this.
It is. It's that shared humanity, that often comes out in times of crisis.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even in the midst of all this darkness, there's still compassion, still hope.
And sometimes that's all that keeps people going.
It really is.
And we're seeing that solidarity reflected in the political sphere, too. Leaders from all the different parties are putting aside their differences.
That's good to hear.
They're expressing their condolences, pledging support, emphasizing the need for unity during this difficult time.
That's so important. It shows the community that they're not alone, that their leaders are with them.
Absolutely.
But not just in words, but in actions.
Right.
And it helps to calm some of that fear and uncertainty, reminds people that there's a collective effort to address the crisis.
And speaking of addressing the crisis, we can't forget about the incredible work being done by all the first responders, the firefighters, the police, the paramedics, and of course the USR teams.
They're the real heroes.
They are, risking their lives to help others.
Yeah, running towards danger when everyone else is running away.
It's amazing.
It speaks volumes about their bravery, their training, their dedication to serving others.
Their courage is remarkable. But amidst all the focus on the investigation, the rescue efforts, the community response, we can't lose sight of the human element here. The families who are grieving, the community that's shaken, the lives that are forever changed.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and trying to figure out what happened. But we have to remember that behind all of this are real people who are suffering.
Yeah.
And that suffering can take so many forms: shock, grief, anxiety, anger.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
And it's not just those directly affected either. This event has impacted the whole city, even the whole country.
I bet.
People are scared, wondering if something like this could happen in their own neighborhood.
That feeling of vulnerability is understandable.
It is.
Especially when we still don't know what caused it. It creates this unease, this feeling that things aren't as safe and secure as we thought.
Exactly. Which is why, as we move forward, it's important to address not just the physical damage, but the psychological scars that this event has left behind.
Absolutely. We have to acknowledge that trauma can manifest in many different ways.
Right.
Some people will have nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety. Others might withdraw from social situations or have trouble concentrating.
It affects everyone differently.
And there's no shame in seeking help.
None at all.
Recognizing that you need support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Exactly.
There are resources available, therapists, support groups, even online platforms where people can connect and share their experiences.
That's so important.
No one should have to go through this alone.
It's so true. And it's important to remember that healing takes time. There's no set timeline for dealing with grief or trauma or loss. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with others. And if you see someone struggling, encourage them to reach out for help. It's a sign of strength to ask for support.
Absolutely.
And as we've been discussing this explosion, it's made me think about all the other similar incidents that have happened, not just in the Netherlands, but around the world. Explosions seem to be a recurring threat, whether they're accidents or deliberate acts.
Yeah, you're right. We see it all the time. Industrial accidents, gas leaks, even acts of terrorism.
Exactly.
And every time it happens, it makes you question safety regulations, emergency preparedness, even the infrastructure we rely on every single day.
And in this case, with the cause still under investigation, it's a good reminder to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Oh, absolutely. We have to let the authorities do their job. Gather evidence, determine the facts, before we start pointing fingers.
It's so easy to get caught up in speculation, especially with social media.
It is.
Yeah.
But we owe it to the victims and their families to respect the process.
That's a really good point. And while we wait for those answers, there are things we can do. We can be more aware of potential hazards in our own environments, learn how to respond in an emergency,
Those are good ideas.
and support organizations like the first responders,
Huh.
who are always there to help when these things happen.
I like that. It's about taking some control back in a situation that feels very much out of control.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about those USR teams. Their work is just so specialized and dangerous. It's like they have to be a detective, an engineer, and an athlete all at the same time.
That's a good way to put it. I read somewhere that they train in these incredibly realistic simulations, like using collapsed buildings and all kinds of high-tech equipment.
Wow.
It must take an incredible amount of skill and mental fortitude to do what they do.
Imagine the pressure, knowing that every decision, every move you make could be the difference between life and death for someone trapped under there.
That's heavy.
It really is.
It's awe-inspiring. And it's not just physical strength they need either. It's emotional strength. Dealing with the trauma, the heartbreak, the constant uncertainty.
It takes a special kind of person to handle that.
No doubt.
And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, the psychological impact of this event, not just on those who were directly affected, but on the community as a whole. Witnessing something like this can be incredibly traumatic.
Absolutely.
And everyone processes trauma differently. Some people need to talk about it. Others need to be alone. Some people find comfort in helping others. There's no right or wrong way to cope.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Exactly. Talk to a therapist.